aqua friends, welcome to my channel. Today I have this beautiful fox that we're going to do in only a couple of layers, and we're going to work wet on wet for a very soft coat effect. And one thing that I like to do when I know I need to have my paper be wet for a really long time is to first start off wetting the animal. And I am going to take my time and wet him really good. I also want the lines where I'm wetting on the side of his face to go over my drawing lines so that the fur will bleed onto that area a little bit and it'll just make him look really soft and fluffy. So now that I put some good coats of water on him, I'm going to let that sink into the paper a little bit, and I'm just going to prepare my colors. The color that I have here is Aussie Yellow Gold. I love this color, or Aussie Red Gold, I believe it's called, from Daniel Smith. And I am going to mix up, of course, my quinacridone red. So I'm getting some puddles of the colors that I plan on using on my palette here. I do have some burnt umber. I also like to use transparent brown oxide from Daniel Smith. So it's either that or burnt umber. I love those rich brown colors that they provide. And of course, I have some burnt sienna. That's the perfect color for a fox. And then the darkest brown I have here is some sepia. So now that I have all my puddles made, I'm going to re-wet my fox because, of course, he's drying since I took some time out to get those puddles made. So I'm going to go over the fox. Now you see my paper is buckling. So I do know that I do have a good amount of moisture on there if my paper is starting to buckle. You don't want puddles on your paper. You do want to make sure that you sop up the water enough. Now I am putting some cobalt blue here just on my palette to start off with maybe some of those undertones of the shadows. So some cool shadows under his muzzle that I'm putting in with the cobalt blue. Along with that, I do have some neutral tint. Now another color that I have here in that little corner is called Buff Titanium, and it's a very creamy color. So trying to get those creamy undertones under his fur. And along with that, I do want the bright orange. I have mixed orange and red. Not really mixed it, but I'm grabbing both colors on my paintbrush so that I get this really nice bright color on my paper. I will change up that color as I continue to paint. There are some sections of the fox that might appear more orangey, where I'm going to bring in more of that red. And notice how beautifully it mixes on your paper. You do get this just really gorgeous bright red versus me grabbing that burnt sienna that I just grabbed. Now look at the difference in that orange versus the orange I made myself. So much prettier, right? So I don't want it everywhere. If it's too flashy everywhere, you really won't know where to look. I'm trying to keep those bright colors closer to his face. Like I said, it's always a good idea to mix up your colors. You don't want to just put it everywhere. You want to vary the colors for interest. There's some areas where he might appear more brown, some areas where he might appear more creamy color, more white. So I'm working around the fox. I'm trying to continue working around different areas of the fox because my paper is drying, especially on that right-hand side where I just did his ear. It's really not blending well. So I kind of stopped putting color there. I'm trying to get as much done as I can in the first layer, and I know that he's not looking too pretty right now. And to tell you the truth, there is a saying in watercolor, because watercolor is done in layers and it's done from lights to darks. So there is an ugly stage, as they call it in watercolor, especially when I'm doing animals. I always second guess myself and think, ugh, I have to start over, or, this this is looking so disconnected, like it is right now. But trust the process and you will see that he will turn out pretty in the end. Now I'm using a fluffy dry brush to try to mix those colors a little bit more, dragging the brush through to get a softer, fuzzier effect before my paper dries completely. I'm using a damp script liner brush, and at this point, if there's any sort of highlights, you can pick those out with a fine brush like I'm doing. You'll have some lighter areas. Now your brush has to be only damp. If it's sopping wet, you'll make a big bloom and you'll wreck the effect. So I do suggest practicing on a scrap piece of paper with your paper wetness levels. So once that's all dry, I'm going back to that ear where it didn't blend very well, and I'm just using a kind of a stiff brush. It's a damp brush, and I'm blending that area out a little bit. Now, I do want to get those darker tones on my fox, and so I'm wetting some areas as I go along to get in some of these darker areas in my second layer. I'm using sepia for this. He has quite a bit of dark brown area around his eye, almost like he's wearing eyeliner. And I'm going ahead with some very thick mixture of sepia, and it almost looks black. And I'm getting that in there. So what I like to do is wet the area first, you notice, with just clean water, and then I go in with my sepia and I'm just kind of blending it out. There I go with my water. And then the sepia. So wherever I'm seeing these browner areas on the fox, that's what I'm trying to get in right now. Now the eye of a fox, the color, it does have a lot of orange undertones. So that is why I'm starting off with the orange, and I am going to do his whole eye in that color. I'm going to darken up around the edges with my burnt sienna and all the different browns that I have in my palette. And we're going to work up that color. What I did to one eye, I'm going to do to the next eye. I'm using clean water, and then I'm going in with my sepia. Some darker liner around the eyes. For these fine details that I'm working on a lot around his eyes, I am using a size number 4 silver brush. Same orange underpainting and then coming in with those darker burnt oranges and browns to build up that eye color. Now notice I am trying to preserve a couple of white spots where the light is hitting his eye. Now his nose is quite dark, so I'm not going to pre-wet that. I'm just taking some sepia and painting in his nose. So he's starting to come out of the ugly stage, folks. He's starting to actually look like a fox now. So I'm going to dry what I've done so far. And I'm going to go in with a second layer to get some more really pretty burnt orange colors on his face. I did feel like his face needed to stand out more from the rest of his body. And I just want those gorgeous golden colors to really shine through here. So that's why I'm re-wetting his whole head area. Coming in with the orange I'm making myself by picking up the two colors of my yellow and red. And notice I'm not putting it everywhere, but I'm sort of trying to highlight and frame his face with this bright color. If your paper's drying, you can spritz your paper. That's what I just did with a very fine mist spray bottle. It'll help to blend the colors. I also am known to use my finger. Going back to the muzzle, that did need to be darker, so I'm adding in my sepia. Okay, if things aren't blending well, you can take a fluffy brush to drag the colors together. Now, under his muzzle, there are some shadows under there that I'm going to work at darkening up more. And I'm getting another layer of darkness on his eyes. If you squint at your reference photo, you will see where your darkest darks are and where you need to do any value adjustments. Okay, so for some final touches, I'm using a script liner brush and that same thick sepia mixture to put in his cute little whiskers. Now I did lose a little bit of the whites of his eyes, and so I'm just drying his face because I'm going to use a marker and I'm adding in those really bright highlights back in, and it does really make his eyes pop. So let me know what you guys think of this tutorial, and if you're going to give it a try, I will see you guys next time.